work that we have been doing along with Sam Evans regarding our next phase in the Prop 39 process. As you know, by February 1st, districts are required under Prop 39 to present a preliminary offer of facilities for the following school year based on the original request by the charter, which came in November 1st. The board item has quite a bit of background detail on it, so I won't go back over all of that, but the charter has, since our last meeting, I think we're actually just before our prior meeting, made a counter proposal that would be considered an in lieu offer of facilities. And you can see some of the proposal, counter proposal, and so forth that have gone back and forth on that. That process will continue, I believe, but in the interim, we are also obligated to, under the law, to provide a preliminary offer by February 1. So we have gone ahead and done that. And what I'll do is just kind of walk you through some of the major points here, and then Mitch can help with this as well. It's really actually 3 calculation points to a preliminary offer and ultimately the final offer. One is coming to some determination about what enrollment will look like. Typically in school districts, we try to be extremely precise as we can be with enrollment. The regulations for charters, however, don't require a level of precision that we would normally try to shoot for. And that's not to say that we're always accurate with our enrollment projections either. We're not. But we do try to be precise, and yet in working through this process, it's a little bit contrary to what our usual process would be in regard to that precision factor. So the first piece is determining the enrollment as best we can without trying to shoot for a really super precise number. If that makes sense. Number 2 is to then figure out a facilities allocation based on that in-district resident enrollment figure, that projection. And then number 3 is to figure out the proposed rent for the following year, and that is based on square footage costs that Mitch can talk about a little bit, but you'll see it also when we get to it in the draft that we've put together for you. So in regard to the enrollment projection, I'll just first refer to page 4. I think page 4 of your document there. We should have where we are talking about what our enrollment projection is for RVC. And this is based on the number that we presented to them on December the 1st. It is, as I said, not as precise as we would normally try to be. In fact, I think that number right now, as it stands, is an overestimate of their enrollment based on the fact that we know now that some of our address verification has turned up several students who actually no longer live within the district. So that process continues. That number, we believe, will continue to fall. I want to point out also, just so everybody has some clarity and understanding around this, this is an area, enrollment projection is something that some of us in this room have been doing for a very long time. I would say probably between Midge and Marcy and me. I think Terry's done this as well. We probably have half a century of enrollment projections under our belts in terms of, in some cases, in mine, I can speak from my own experience, districts of 22,000, a district of our size, districts between that. So we've been doing this a long time, and we base our projections on things that we observe. We based on our projections on things that we know from past data. We don't assume, for example, that 100% of our students that are currently enrolled will return next year. That is an assumption that we would not make, because statistically the chances of that happening are pretty close to 0. We would not assume that all the people who say that they're going to come to the district actually will. Again, that's not a statistically supportable conclusion to make. So when we look at enrollment projections and we make our projections, and we really outline the process that we went through in making this determination in our letter of December 1, We do that with great care and trying to be as precise as we can. But in this particular case, we know that the number that we came up with for our December 1 letter and that we carried forward to this today represents a number that we again think is actually probably not as precise as we would normally want to make it if we were projecting for our school district. We would consider the factors of students' addresses not being in district and other factors that would actually reduce our enrollment figure below what we've stated here. But for purposes of this and the requirements that under Prop 39 that don't require us to be quite as precise, we are projecting RVC's enrollment next year to be at 116 enrolled, which with a 95% attendance factor puts them at about 110 and change for ADA. So you'll see that reflected on page 4. The next thing I would draw your attention to is on page 8. Again, we point out the ADA of 110, and then on page 9, there's a reference to the percentage of students at Whitehill that RVC would represent with that particular enrollment for ADA. And the reason that number is important, and that will come back to us later, is because for space allocation purposes at Whitehill, we need to be thinking about what percentage of this overall student body is encompassed in the in-district projected enrollment for RVC students. So based on this calculation, it looks like it would be about 13.5% of Whitehill's population. I know that some of us have read, some of you pointed out to me that you've read on social media somewhere that somebody is projecting our enrollment will drop by 40 at Whitehill next year. That's not what we're projecting, so I'm not sure where that number is coming from. I know that number has had some historical accuracy in the past, but not in the last couple of years. So we've not seen that kind of a drop. We're not expecting that kind of a drop. In fact, next year we're expecting Whitehill's enrollment overall will be fairly flat. So 13.5% of Whitehill's overall student enrollment, which would be Whitehill students and the in-district students at Ross Valley, that 13.5% will come back again later in the draft, and you'll see that when we talk about outside space, when we talk about auditorium or multi-purpose room, and when we talk about library. On page 10, we talk about teaching stations and what that looks like in terms of actual allocation. So the allocation of teaching stations, which we would think of normally as regular classrooms, that allocation is based on a comparability with our own district loading of classrooms. And this year, our classrooms are loaded or staffed or allocated to students at a higher ratio than they were last year, which then affects comparability for purposes of calculation for their charter. So what you'll see there is that based on our breakdown of their projected enrollment, we have a K through 3 teaching stations of 3.27. We have 4th and 5th teaching stations of 1.69 for a total of 4.96. Rounded up, that's 5 classrooms. So that would be 5 classrooms offered in this preliminary offer. On page 11, we talk about the square feet of specialized space. Based on the calculation, we are required to provide approximately 1931 square feet of specialized space. We're actually over allocating their special space by about 475 square feet, and that's explained in the draft a little bit. I think basically when we look at how the rooms are allocated and situated, it made sense rather than taking rooms and dividing them into smaller sections that we would consider, for example, the mobile unit that's there as essentially a half a classroom, and then an additional classroom, full classroom above and beyond that for art, music, and for pull-out and that sort of thing. So we're talking 5 classrooms through the teaching station calculation, essentially 1.5 classrooms through the calculation for specialized space for a total of 6.5 classrooms. So currently today, RVC sits with 8.5 classrooms allocated. So this would be an allocation of 6.5. Page 11. Page 14. This is where the library and MPR come into play. The library is approximately a 2,268 square foot facility. If RVC occupies about 13.5% of the student population, then they'd be entitled to about 13.5% of 2,268 square feet. Same calculations used with regard to the MPR, which is really the gym. Total allocation of square foot to the charter of all the different space that we're talking about, and that's administrative space, everything comes out to 11,053 square feet. Of that, the room space, because we also count in that 11,000, that's also hallways and that sort of thing. So actual room square footage is 8,605. Am I right so far, Midge? Or jump in if there's anything that I'm...
No, you're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. Okay. Page 15, I want to point out that the outdoor field area, currently we allocate about 20% of the outdoor field area to RVC. If they actually have 13.5% of the student population, we could reduce that outdoor field area reasonably. We are not proposing to do that. We're proposing instead to just leave it as is. It would involve a lot of logistical changes of fencing and so forth. And we just think that it's better to just leave things as they are. So they would have an over-allocation. In addition to the over-allocation of specialized space we talked about before, there would be an over-allocation of outdoor space as well. And we're proposing that it be left at that. Page 16, we're getting kind of close to the end, is where the rent estimate is being done. Midge is basing the rent estimate on an old square footage number, which will be updated for this year. So we're making it clear in this preliminary offer that the rent calculation of $62,460 for 2019-20 is actually a calculation based on a square footage rate that will need to be updated. And that will happen as soon as we have the hard data for that and actuals so that we can
You mean
update
the state is updating the per square foot rate to be paid?
how do we, where are we on that, Mitch?
No, so actually,
It's not a state number, that's us.
yeah, it's our financials.
Right.
And so there's certain things that get incorporated into calculating that per square foot.
Okay, so it's percentage of the full district.
Right, and it's based on the prior year. So, for example, the rate for this year, 18-19, was based on our audit, our financials for 17-18.
So last two pieces just to point out is that their rent would be based on a total allocated square feet of 10,804, but they actually have access to a little bit more than that, 11,053, and the difference there, they don't pay the rent on the 11,053, they pay the rent on the 10,804. And the reason for that is that the 249 square feet difference, the delta between the two, is storage space and custodial maintenance closet space, which is not conditioned space. So rather than include that in the calculation for rent, that is incorporated into their overall rent as just an unconditioned space that we're allowing them. That makes sense. So that kind of takes you through the major points of this. It's a 17-page document. I know a lot of it is background and sort of the template language that's normally included in this letter. You've seen it before, but I think the main points are the projected enrollment piece, the calculation of room allocation, and then the rent. So, Midge, anything to add? So I went through that quickly.
No, you covered it all.
A lot of time spent on this, and a lot of work done to work with these numbers and try to figure out all of this detail so that it could be added in here for tonight. So we're making a recommendation that this is the preliminary offer that we would give to RVC. They have until March 1st to have a response to that, and then we have till April 1st to file our final facilities offer. So this is the preliminary facility offer. There you have it.
Colleagues, questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So, I mean, one of the things obviously we've been through is being in front of the Sonoma County Superior Court, and we have two rulings in that case that have given us perspective and context in terms of the underlying methodology to use. And my first question is, are those same methodologies are what are contained or used in this particular draft?
Yes.
So we are following what the court has told us on the various topics in terms of doing the methodology. Right. How did the percentage change in terms of shared space from 13.5%? What was it last year? I don't remember.
It was
Closer to
closer to 20%. And so, well, and that's again based on what the enrollment that was projected at.
Right.
So, it's just a total percentage of what we're expecting enrollment to look like for next year at Whitehill, and what we anticipate or what we believe is going to be an accurate enrollment figure for RVC, and just a straight percentage.
Using the same methodology that essentially the court told us that we had the discretion to do, or we were required to do.
Did you have another one? You said you had two.
No, that the second one was the percentage.
So we're talking about year 3 of the charter. After year 1 of the charter, there was an over allocation penalty that was assessed against the charter school, right?
Yes.
What was the amount of that penalty?
So it was over $139,000. That was the prior year.
2017.
Yeah, so it was over $139,000.
And his staff used that analysis, kind of dovetailing off of Mark's question, in terms of informing this particular document that's been taken into consideration in coming up with the numbers and doing the analysis, right?
I would say yes. We looked at what their over allocation was, and came up with what a reasonable basis would be for the projection.
Thank you.
I mean, as we look at history, Wesley, I mean, as you know, the last 2 years we've accepted the charter's projected enrollment, even though we did not believe that it was necessarily going to happen the way they projected. And it turned out we were right. But we didn't have historical data to go by. So now we have some historical data to go by. We know, for example, that their kindergarten classes, their TK kindergarten classes of new kids have averaged 17 students. We know, for example, that this year they will lose 30 fifth grade students. So there's a delta there. If they do 17 again, there's a delta of 13 kids. We know, and it's written in here, I forget what page I can find it, but it's written in here that we've looked at their intent to enroll forms. We know that there is a fairly high percentage, I think it's 11% or so, of their intent to enroll forms that every single year have people who say they're going to come but never do.
You mean the same people?
Same
so
people.
John Smith says,
Same
yes,
people.
I'm meaningfully interested.
Right. So we've done that analysis and we've looked at that and based on now having historical data, we have something to work with. Whereas first year we didn't know. I mean, they said 189 kids in district, and we did not believe that that was an accurate projection, but we didn't have data to support that. We now have historical data to support that.
Can you tell me a little bit more, when you were talking about page 4, you thought that the 116 was even more than what we might otherwise think, given some recent understanding? What is that about?
Yeah, if we do an actual cohort survival, meaning just moving the students up and not taking into consideration aberrations like, the closure of Hartwood, that was an aberration. That's not something anybody could plan. They couldn't plan it. We couldn't plan it. That could happen. And if it happens, then you have an influx of kids. But we know that from moving up just their students, moving them up just like we would with our own students, and then taking into account some of the addresses that are now being found to not be in-district addresses that were originally stated as such, but now parents have come forward and said, I've moved and I don't live in the district anymore. We know now that some of those addresses are changing to out-of-district addresses, and so even the 116 we think is not a totally accurate projection. We think it's really it's closer in enrollment, probably down to 105, 106. Right.
But
In
that,
enrollment.
but that's not what we're assuming.
That's not what we're assuming. We're assuming the 116 because when we put our projections together in November and sent them, we were still working on the address verification piece. We hadn't heard from all of those parents yet.
And you're using the methodology, to Mark's point,
And we're
that
using
still has been approved.
right. We're using a methodology that doesn't require us to be as precise.
So kids who have moved out of the district, they still get to attend RVC.
Absolutely. Well,
If
so
they
choose.
seek to.
Right. Absolutely.
It's just that they're not counted for the purposes of proposition.
Correct.
Correct.
And you're saying that recently we've learned that there are four families or four pupils
So far.
that even though we know for a fact that they're not going to be counted towards in-district, we're not discounting the 116 based upon that new information.
Right. Just there you could discount it.
But we're not doing that.
We're not doing that. We're not recommending it.
And these people came forward on their own. So,
Yeah, Terry's been working on that more closely. How did that, they came forward on their own, or how was that done, Terry?
Well, yes, they came forward on their own and indicated either in the enrollment information that we were sent, I believe in December, their addresses changed when we received new information that their addresses have changed. We have investigated some of those people, and immediately after the investigation, we got that new information.
And are these for students, for example, people who have filed intent to enroll forms?
Yes, they did file intent to enroll.
So that, to the point that you made earlier, 100%, it's very unlikely that 100% of intent to enroll forms are going to be in district.
Well, that's
And
true
or
for,
enroll.
to be fair, that's true for us too. I mean, people say they'll come to the district and then last minute they decide not to, or they move
Yes.
somewhere. I mean, I've never
And
heard
then
of
if
it
they've
being
done it
that.
3 years in a row, that is some history.
That we've not seen in our district, but yeah, that's an issue.
So the fifth grade class at RVC that has 30 children, so we don't think, based upon what we're seeing, that that's going to be replicable at the TKK level, right? Because what we're seeing is something that's just over half of that, at least on the previous year.
Right, their past history does not reflect that they would be taking in 30. Now, could they? I suppose.
But like that wasn't reflective of what we saw in the intent to enroll forms for that level, or did the intent to enroll forms, are they specific enough to say
That,
that
yeah,
level?
that I don't know. I don't know if Terry remembers either exactly.
I don't remember the
kindergarten
exact
intention.
number of TKK that were coming
Yeah, I
in,
don't remember. We'd
but I
have to pull
believe, I don't remember, but Midge and I worked on the numbers and Midge kept the chart, so Midge probably can pull up our chart.
Just curious, so when you think of the transition from the MAP program to RVC, that fifth grade class, the current fifth grade class, where was that? Is this the second to the last MAP, if you want to call it MAP classes that come through, or is this the last one? How does that?
No, I think the fourth grade, which will be fifth, The third grade class, I think, will be their last.
And how do those numbers currently look for in-district for RVC for the third and fourth grade?
This very moment,
Yeah.
I can, if you give me 1 second, I will pull it up. We keep all those monthly.
I think just as another data point while she's looking that up, we know, for example, that because we get the enrollment reports from RVC every month, that their enrollment has stayed at around 122-ish since March of last year.
Yeah.
So what's important and significant about that in an enrollment projection environment is that the span from March until December includes the prime season for recruitment of new students to a school and for enrollment. So that's the spring and the summer. So they did not experience overall, they may have experienced some new, some left. The net effect though is that the numbers stayed flat, right around 122 or so for all of those months, even though they went through that recruitment phase. So that's another data point that we're using in terms of making our projection.
I don't need the exact numbers. I was just interested in us with the biggest.
The 20, it is their biggest class.
Okay, all right.
The 24, based on what the information we had, there were 24 combination TK or KITEs. We also looked at how many of those children were siblings of current RVC students. So those we believe are more likely to attend than not. And I think we had about a half a dozen of those. So we looked at that exactly so that we weren't, we were really, spending some time with that. So currently in third grade, they have 23 in district, and in fourth grade they have 16 in district and 30 in fifth grade. So currently their TKK numbers is 20 total for TK and in district, and 16 in district kinder.
Great, thank you.
We projected them for next year on page 10. The TKK numbers are projected at maybe 17, which is actually higher than the TKK numbers have been historically. So there's been some.
Does that average 120 that you're talking about include the infusion of the Heartwood?
The average of the 120.
You said it stayed 122 for a period of time.
That included.
That is right. So that's kind of the anomaly that's included in that number, but that's not necessarily
correct.
Colleagues, any more questions before we go out for public comment?
Yeah, I'd like to get more comment.
Great. Okay, how many people will want to make public comment this evening on this item? 1, 2, 3. You're gonna just maximize. She's here. Yes. Okay, awesome. So please introduce yourselves, have at it, and everybody's got 3 minutes. In whatever order you prefer.
Hi, Rob Sandusky, Fairfax resident. I got 2 awesome girls, one's at Manor, one's at Whitehill this year. I know along with this, there's a proposal from RVC about an in lieu rental agreement. And I think there's some confusion in the public about how that would be different from the Prop 39 process, particularly in terms of how you figure out how much space. For example, is it more of as if they were renting from a commercial real estate location or something like that, and so you try to fit the space to need, or is it tied to the Prop 39 numbers in some way that the calculations that you just went through? Like, how do you figure out how much space in an in lieu versus a Prop 39?
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Sharon?
Sure. Sharon Sager. First of all, I would just like to point out that somehow we can never seem to get the right address on any of these letters that you send to us. but this PO box number on here has nothing to do with the school, never has, and we've never sent you anything with this PO box on it. So even though I've sent repeated requests to the district to please use our PO box at 791, it seems to constantly change to my home address, to any other thing that you guys decide to pop in there. So if you could please just somehow get the right address in your database, I'd love that. Second of all, I'd like to say that we do not anticipate that our numbers in any way, shape, or form this year will provide an over-allocation penalty to the district. And so I think that's a nice thing for everyone to know, is that we got close enough to our numbers that that's not an issue for us. And in general, it's this time of year when we start to pick up other students from other places who have really tried to hang in there and have the best first semester they can, and determine that it doesn't always work well for them. And this is a important transition time for families who need to make one. And so our enrollment has gone up, and you'll see that and reflected in the reports that you get from us for our January enrollment. Also, Proposition 39 did not intend for the documents, and we've discussed this ad nauseum in letters back and forth, but that the people who sign the intent to enroll form are not supposed to be equated one-to-one to who actually shows up. And it's a demonstration of the enrollment that we believe that we'll have. And we've also explained that many, many families come to us who hadn't made that decision back in October of the prior year to come to our school, and that our numbers do go up. Some of those people don't show up, but other new people do show up. And so it was not the intent of the legislation that those exact people who sign intent to enroll forms are the only ones that you should consider, but you should also look at the numbers of other families who have come forward after that time and who fill those spots of the people who didn't end up coming. So I'd just like to point out that last year we had quite a few new families join us throughout the year, and that the percentage of families who came from Heartwood closing was actually a very small percent of our overall enrollment growth from students at the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And then there's so many more things I could say, but I'm not going to take a lot more time, because I'm hoping that there will be a lot of things that change in the next few months. But I think if you get too nitty-gritty down into the details and try to eliminate people, you are missing the whole fact that Proposition 39 recognizes that it's not going to be an exact one-for-one in the demonstration of our enrollment that we've shown you.
Thank you.
I'll try to be concise. I'm kind of a talker. So, in my experience at Cascade Canyon for the last 11 years as a parent, well, when I first checked out Cascade, I was also checking out the MAP program for my daughter, who's now at Drake and doing great in 10th grade. And we went to Cascade Canyon because she had selective mutism, so she didn't talk in preschool for 3 years. So she talked at Cascade Canyon on her first day of school. So that's why we were there, and to mitigate other kinds of expenses for our family. So that worked out really well. And I do think, and I was on the board at Cascade for a number of years, and my experience as both a parent and a board member, or I should say past parent as of last Friday, is that the quality of education was lacking there. And I know that my daughter, who just moved to White Hill, was not interested in moving over to RVC because we were, kind of concerned about her education, and we're giving her a choice along the way. So we were one of those people that kept saying, we want to come, but then never came. Like when you said there's people like that, I was like that with both of my kids for the last 11 years, on and on, when there was a alternative free option in the community, that because we want to have these progressive values and want to do the whole child education thing, like a lot of people in the community would like. So I honestly have no opinion about the matter, because I've just been over there in private school, not really involved with this whole thing. So I'm just aware that My experience at Cascade Canyon is that the school is probably failing at this point because there isn't a proper education being offered for a very high fee. And so, some of us are going, and there's going to be more people going over to the public schools, where there's like 67 kids there right now, so it's not like a big wrench in this, calculation that's going on in terms of numbers, because it's not that many people. So I don't know if it's useful information. Like the Hartwood thing had more bearing because there's more kids involved with that. But this, there's going to be, if they can't raise $100,000 in the next few months, they can't even stay open till May, Cascade Canyon. So, next year is very much in question in terms of, so, just like 67 kids. And I know that 2 of us moved over yesterday to Ross Valley. And, a few people are like on the fence, and there's going to be a bunch of people, but not that many. So, I don't know. I have no opinion about the matter. I'm just kind of talking that,
Okay, then be done.
I'm done.
Yay! Thank you. That was super interesting. I
Right.
just trying to throw you a little hook there.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Yes.
My name is Bruce Crock. Just want to thank you all for the hard work, and I appreciate the complexity of making a forward projection, and it's really difficult to do. I think that we're in a position of uncertainty with what's going to happen in the next year. We don't know if a school's going to close. We don't know if the people that intended to enroll, or if other people come in from over here, or if there's a massive campaign to encourage people to not go to that charter school and to wind up at White Hill. So we have uncertainty, and what we need to do as mature adults is figure out how we're going to deal with the uncertainty. So we're going to make a projection, we're going to create some budgets, and we're going to be wrong, and they're going to wind up being more people over here, less people over there. So what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to cooperate to solve the problems rather than fight about how the decision was made? So I would encourage us to recognize that we're not going to predict the accurate number of students here or there, that we're going to, when we get to that point, we're going to have to reevaluate that we're too many rooms here and too few rooms over there, and then we're going to have to resolve it. So, and we'll do that in a way that where we all collaboratively work together. I've got a kid in White Hill. I want him to have space. I support the charter. I want them to have space. I want us all to be satisfied so that we're not arguing with each other and putting up stupid signs around the town that make people not want to come to this town anymore. So, 5 years ago, we had an incredible reputation with choices in town and people that all loved that choice. Now the reputation that we have as a community is a divisive community. It's foolish because we're all smart and good people that want to cooperate. So, let's acknowledge that we have uncertainty. Let's plan to try to resolve the mistakes that we made in this plan, because we're not going to make a right plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's so much fear and distrust in this community that it kind of wrecks the community. It really does. And in terms of numbers, I've been resisting saying this or bringing this up, but there's been such a negative campaign all the way around that a lot of people chose not to go to the Ross Valley Charter because there was just such a negative campaign on it. And the numbers of the charter would have been a lot more successful if there hadn't been that. And personally, I think there's been a lot of disinformation on both sides and a lot of bad moves on pretty much all sides. And how do we get past that and just rebuild the community and just move forward and just realize it's all everybody's kids and all everybody's families, and just provide a good education for everybody, whatever their choices are, without fighting about it and basically I asked a little girl in front of the Good Earth about 6 months ago where she went to school, and she wouldn't tell me. She did not want to tell me. And finally she said, I go to the charter. And it's like, that really sucks. For a kid, for a child to feel like they have to hide where they go to school to adults or not put it out. It really sucks. I mean, Manor's a great school. Brookside's a great school, the Charter's a good school, they're all great school, and it's good teachers all the way around. But for a kid to not want to say where they go to school, want to hide it from the adults because they know there's so much strife in the community, that's just evil. That's the adults failing. We need to get along. We need to get past this. We need to not kind of wreck our kids and put that on our kids, because that's what we're doing. The kids feel it. It's not good.
Thank you. Last call.
More time.
Okay.
Please consider sitting at a table. I have asked so many times, but with the leaders of the Ross Valley Charter and the teachers, you guys can all come to agreements together. And I believe that you could come to agreements with these people that I have known, you guys have all known for a very, very, very long time, that are reasonable. You have the same goals. It's to educate our kids, to love our kids, to protect our kids. And if you could sit together, I don't see how anything can get done between lawyers, correspondences, and social media. And we're all missing this face-to-face. And you don't know what might come out of an opportunity to sit together. And I really think you've got to put aside past grudges. I know you've said before, you're not basing it on emotional stuff. That's baloney. There is so much history and emotional stuff. And we don't know what could happen if you can't sit with somebody. I mean, I just feel like that is what we should expect of leadership. You sit with your adversaries as well as your supporters. You cannot learn about your community without learning from the people that are not being served or are upset or over there. That we are all one, it's true. And I just implore you, please, please consider sitting together and just trying it and seeing what can come of it. And save us the money. That's a lot of money we're wasting over a small amount of space, a really small amount of space. And if you don't have room at Whitehill, please consider another facility. We have another facility that does have space. Please consider opening it up. There are ways, we have ways. So we should not be fighting over 800 square feet at Whitehill. If you really know that charter is not going to fit there, let's look at something else. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, another round?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I've followed the numbers that we have, that we project. The one thing we really haven't discussed here should be discussed is, do we have the figures of their out-of-district students? It seems like we're spending a lot of time trying to find enough space for the in-district students. But have we talked about the bigger number of out-of-district students that go to that school? I mean, we're shoving all these kids in those areas, but we haven't addressed together tonight, certainly, how many people that are going to the attendant school that we aren't required to provide space for, but they're actually at their school. Because to a layman looking at 5.5 classroom offer for 116 students doesn't seem like there should be that big of a problem, but we really haven't brought up how many students are really at their school that we don't have to provide space for, so that the public as a whole gets a concept of maybe why the tenant is pushing for so much more space than what we think is fair. Do we have the numbers of how many students that they have?
I think we do have the total number, Terry, but we tend to focus on the in-district resident, obviously, because that's the one that drives the facilities request, but I don't know.
40, the RVSD, based on what they've given me, says 41 out of district kids attending.
45 now.
Well, it's good that we talk about what we have to provide space for, but it's a bigger picture here. There's 40-something other students that we are not required to have space for, but obviously they need space for. So I think, to have this discussion without including those numbers is...
Well, it's two different things, so I'm not sure.
Right, how much we have to provide space for.
For the purposes of Prop 39, which is
Yes.
the nature of this evening's discussion,
Yes.
it's entirely irrelevant.
Yes.
But if your concern is that the community is not understanding why...
Well, some of the feedback that we just got were, why can't we just sit down and figure this all out? And that's a big part of the equation. That's part of the tenants, part of the equation. They have to find not just enough for the in-district students, they have to find room for 41, 44 other students that we aren't required to provide space for.
So those kids aren't physically there as well. I think that's a point.
The first speaker spoke to the notion about how you go about the in lieu process. I think, and I'd just be curious about
How we did that.
about what that entails and how you allocate space. I think that would be great.
Well, so there were a couple things with that, and Mitch can help with this too. We when they proposed an in lieu agreement, we said, okay, what are our interests here? Our interests are one, to make sure that the allocation of space, even though we get it, that the regulation doesn't require precision, as we would normally think of it, we would like some degree of precision with regard to classrooms. So the idea that the charter would be over allocated space and that there would be rooms there that we could use for Whitehill that go without us being able to use them for a whole year is problematic for us. So yeah, there's an over allocation penalty. We get it. We understand that's how the thing works. But one of our interests in if we're going to do an in lieu was to create a scenario whereby if there is a miscalculation, if the numbers that you're saying don't materialize, then the rooms will be given back right away. Not in April, not some other time. So that was one thing that we incorporated into that in lieu. Now the in lieu is not the Prop 39, so it's a completely different process. You can, as far as I know, pretty much negotiate anything that you want. So what we came up with there was trying to figure out a way to come up with a classroom allocation within bands, so that if the enrollment projection isn't as accurate, then how many classrooms would you get? So we offered 6 classrooms. I think that was the in lieu. I was looking for it. 6 classrooms, assuming an enrollment of somewhere between 125 and 139.
That's correct.
And then from there, we said, okay, what would happen if they went below that or above that? And we came up with that sliding scale that we created, where based on a particular census date, and we put down August 31st, or the end of August would make the most sense for us, because if we're going to get classrooms back or have to give classrooms, we'd like to know that sooner than later. So we came up with a census date. There was no, formula behind that census date other than just wanting to have the answer sooner rather than later. And then we came up with that sliding scale that if, the numbers are between this and this, then we'd give an extra classroom. If they're between this and that, then they would give back an extra classroom or two.
But with the fundamental point being actuals and not projected.
It'd be actuals, it wouldn't be projected, it wouldn't be what's gonna happen by P2, because that's the other thing. So you project your enrollment and you have until April to hit it. The comment was made that there's not gonna be any over allocation penalty this year. I disagree with that. I think there will be an over allocation penalty this year, because it's not based on a point in time when the enrollment hits a certain number. It's based on the whole year and an aggregate of that year. Am I correct, Mitch?
Yes.
So even though accuracy isn't required by the regulation for our purposes in terms of space allocation at Whitehill, it's pretty important. So the logic for creating that scenario is to try to say, okay, if we're going to end this process now, as opposed to going through the whole thing, then let's try to create something that gives an incentive for the charter to say, yeah, we'll take that and we'll take this offline. Otherwise, let's just go through the Prop 39 process and let the chips fall where the chips fall.
And we got a response to that, didn't we?
Right.
And that had upside, that if the enrollment was at some levels, there would be more rooms.
Right.
That we would give it. And so I looked at that and I thought, how could we possibly do that in the moment? So I wasn't.
We get locked in at a certain point.
Yeah.
In terms of the planning for the school year.
Yeah. So I get that we're attempting to figure out whether there's an alternative road, but I don't know how we can plan for not having a maximum number that currently exists. Because then we're going to find 3 more rooms somewhere at Whitehill or somewhere else. Yeah. It doesn't seem plausible for that negotiation. I'm not against the negotiation. I also But what's important to me is that it could be actually operationalized. I mean, that we could actually do it if the actual number was more than we expected.
Right.
I mean,
Well, that's why we built it for, they've never been above 125 in district resident enrollment, and we just heard tonight that maybe they will be, okay. But we built that particular range of 125 to 139 to account for that. I think what the response was, and that's not, the agenda was printed and then we added, I think on Monday, we got a counter to the counter from RVC. We printed that in the actual online agenda. It's on there. And we could simply move down a little bit. Keep going. There you go. Okay, move up a little bit. That's the, keep going up. There you go. Hold it right there. That's what they propose in terms of their breakdown. So essentially, keep the status quo in terms of number of rooms for 125 or so. So we looked at that, and we think the Prop 39 avenue makes more sense.
Do those numbers take into the Sonoma Court judge ruling of the methodology of figuring out the class size?
No. This is
No.
just
I know that's 39.
Remember, it's in lieu.
Right, but I mean, is
So-
it anywhere near?
no.
No.
I mean, even, and that's
So
a
the
good
8
question,
classroom
Ryan,
hours-
because even at below 80, under Prop 39, the
It
charter
would be-
is not entitled to any
Right.
space.
but what's interesting about it, when you look at it, is that it was when we went through last year, there was an accepted projected enrollment of 144, right?
Correct.
And that fits in that band, and the demand was for 9 classrooms, right?
Right.
And that position lost in court.
The original
Okay.
demand was for something like 13.
13 or
13, but like when we actually
Did take that.
went down the road of actually
Right.
the
More
decision
realistic
point of the
demand was
judge.
for 9.
Right.
To answer what I thought I heard as the actual question, Rob, is in lieu, you could just do whatever you want. And if both parties agree, then that's the deal. So that's great. And it has no Byzantine steps. And to my mind, one of the only concerns was that if you miss any of the Prop 39 steps, even if you're engaging in an alternative thing, you can get in big fat trouble, and I didn't even want to know what that might look like. So we pursued both simultaneously, in the hopes that something conducive to both parties not necessitating Prop 39 could happen, but well aware that in the instance that not be the case, we would need to have a compliant timeline requisite box checking in place. So the answer is you can do anything.
I actually really appreciated that we did try to come up with
Yeah.
that you tried a creative solution that to me met the needs of the children that are involved here, looking for a real number that would benefit everyone because it's about real kids in real seats.
So that everybody
So I
has
appreciate that very much.
what they
Realistic
need.
goal. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I did too, thank you.
Plus, I think that also speaks to what Alice and Bruce are saying about trying to sit down and be reasonable with reasonable people about reasonable requests. If you have the students, we want you to have the classroom. And I think that's part of the whole concept of trying to, of course, we have to follow the Prop 39 road because to not do that is irresponsible. But there's another solution that's being worked on. That how fast did we come up with that? Pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
It was a pretty quick solution, and it actually it showed, I thought, a nice reach out. And I'm not on this board long enough to understand what you've said, people not listening to people. I mean, to me, that's a great way to say, hey, more kids, you get more classrooms. Less kids, you get less classrooms. It makes pretty much sense to me. So I think when I was taking notes on what both of you were saying, I think that's very much along the lines of that type of reach out and try to get around the lawyers and stuff and try to put down a reasonable thing for both people. So
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me is that when you do an in lieu agreement for a single year, you have to assume a certain maximum number of classrooms because it's not practical to do it off of actual numbers. numbers.
Right.
And so when I saw this, what I thought of was, some future construct of some other year, if the enrollment ever gets to this level, that could be a construct that would make sense to look at. But in real time, thinking about more space, materially more space than what already is being provided at Lake Health seemed unrealistic for a 1 year deal. It just didn't seem like that was in the cards.
So ultimately, I guess just to kind of summarize, we have two processes going at the same time. What's before you tonight is recommended approval of the Prop 39 preliminary offer, but as we included this in the board agenda packet, so everyone can see it, there is also this other process going at the same time. Whether this process will help prematurely end the Prop 39 process or not, I don't know, but in the meantime, as Ann said, we go forward meeting the timelines that we're required to do. And
Like Prop 39,
Right.
we didn't instigate.
right, that request came to us, and we have an obligation to respond to it. So this will be our response, at least that's what we're recommending, and we'll go forward from there.
All right, anything else? Colleagues? No? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve staff's recommendation.
One second.
Wesley?
Aye.
Annalisa?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Anne? Aye. Mark?
Aye.
Alrighty, thank you very much. Then we have our final discussion and vote item is the recommended approval of the school accountability report cards.
Terry,